Vanya, In Search for the Future. Written by the Worst One. Chapter 1, Life as a Hell. Part 1. Life is an act made in ignorance. When one chooses to have a child, is such a choice born out of sympathy for the child? Can any progenitor truly say that it is better here than it was there? Life itself is nothing more than a self-righteous passion project. If one was to weigh up both the pain and pleasure of their own life, where can it be said that the most pleasure is found? Is it not in the creation of another? If it is that the happiest moment in one's life is the creation of another, then life as a whole can be thought of as nothing more than an act of selfishness and avarice. Life is as the boulder of Sisyphus, passed from one onto another. Is it still not known that this is a summitless mountain? Consider that which is good, pleasure, relief, the achievement of a goal. It is said that good abounds in the world, that good is endemic to existence, yet it is also said that the bad so too does abounds in this world, pain, grief, apathy. Is it that these two parts exist in harmony, that one is as a counterbalance to another? For all pain, is there the same joy? For all failure, is there the same achievement? For all apathy, is there the same fulfillment? Think of life in its most primal form, the act of one animal engaged in the consumption of another. Could one say that the joy of one animal outweighs the suffering of another, that satiety is the counterbalance to suffering, or appetite the ally of agony? It is clear here that the pain outweighs pleasure as an elephant outweighs a feather. Pain is what dominates in this world, it is agony itself that has made existence its resting place. Think of the best pleasure you have achieved, the best love, the best happiness, the best smell, the best sight, the best feeling. Think of all good, all that is good, all that was good, all that will be good, and know its embrace. Now consider pain. Give me a cubic centimeter of your flesh and I could give you pain, pain that would swallow you as the ocean swallows a grain of salt, and you would always be ripe for it, from before the time of your birth to the moment of your death. Pain can sometimes come with a caveat, pain for purpose, endurance of pain until wounds become scars, and then at the end of one's journey, they find respite when they look up to the heights which they have fallen from, seeing those same scars engraved into the heavens. One may strive so that one's reach extends so far beyond his grasp, but I do have to wonder, what is it that they are reaching for? What is it that I am reaching for? What is it that humanity itself is in search of? Humanity moves, this is true, we see ends, and we see beginnings, loss, and gain, but is it true that we are advancing? An object in motion without a desired destination can never move forward, nor can it go back, no advancement, no retreat, simple, sheer, movement, the constant spinning of a beginningless wheel. It can only be said that we are as we have been, alive. The world and reality itself is merely a wheel, spin it does and spin it must. Spinning, spinning from nowhere to nowhere, always spinning but never moving, spinning now, spinning again, and spinning forever, till motion itself ceases. The reason for such spinning is a lack of essential constituents. We as individuals might have our own respective goals and aspirations in life, things that we see as being meaningful to us. These meaningful actions, however, arise from three substrates: reference, desire, and terminus. One might find meaning in becoming a doctor, a painter, a sculptor, or a pianist, because he has first seen that others were able to achieve this end. Through the knowledge of others' actions he gained the insight that such terrain was pathable. Without this knowledge he could have found no such meaning. If one never knows the piano, how can he aim to be a pianist? Knowledge alone is not enough, one too needs desire for the craft. Even if a man knows of the piano, it does not mean that he is drawn to make that his life's meaning. There first needs to be an innate prerequisite desire for such actions. The last of such necessary prerequisites would be a terminus, an endpoint, a point at which one can achieve their aim. Around this point, there is some contention, as one's aim may never be in reach, and instead, it is the striving that gives meaning. Yet is it not that such striving in and of itself indicates terminus? If one can say that they are moving forward, then so too must they agree that there is a point they are aiming for, a higher level in which they strive to achieve. Even if one's aim seems to be constantly striving upward, if not constrained to our mortality, one would be able to be a pianist in the throne room of heaven. From such a position there is no advancement. Now take these three predicates, reference, desire, and a terminus, and consider humanity as a species. What is its reference? The birds, the trees, the reptiles, the other beasts. Is it that man aims to be like any of these creatures, not just to encompass one feature but to strive to become its likeness? I'd think not, and even if it did, would such a mutation even be permissible? Think now of desire. What is that we as a species desire? Can a species even desire? Does it have the necessary facilities to undertake such an action? Rather, humanity itself is an amorphous mass clambering in every which way, in a balancing act of freedom and stability. Humanity does not strive for anything beyond sheer propagation, and now even such a striving is in contention. Now the last, does humanity have a terminus? Where lies its endpoint? As I have stated prior, without an aim, there can be no endpoint, there can be no point at which humanity's work is done, and such is the reason for its spinning. Part 2. Joy, if not superseded by greater joy, leads to apathy, and great joy, followed by a lesser pleasure, induces despair. Look for example at the child actor, peaking at such an early age, the rest of his life, even if seeming to be good to others, will always pale in comparison to such euphoria. Now think of a man served only Michelin 5-star meals. If he was to have a common low-value takeaway, his joy, for that moment, would be lost. Think even about the perpetual consumption of the same such greatness, no brighter nor dimmer. Does it not after time lose its sheen? No longer does it inspire the awe it once did, the novelty has worn thin. Think of one who drives over a great bridge. The first time he sees it he is in awe, the second less so, the third even less, until an awe-inspiring journey becomes a simple commute. Joy that is not the progenitor of greater joy, is nothing more than a momentary high, and a precursor to apathy. The only time in which apathy does not set in is when one finds meaning in their work, meaning brought about by striving towards an aim, and here lies the problem. The aim of all species including humans is that of propagation throughout space and time. This is counteracted however by the existence of other species. All species in excess are consumed in excess, but for man it is different. This constant striving for perpetuation leaves the species disregarding its own state. It doesn't matter if the animals are happy or sad. If it doesn't relate to propagation, then it is a non-factor. However, for humans, this is not the case. We have access to an ability that no other animal has. We can ask questions, and from this ability, we no longer have to see propagation regardless of effect as our main goal. We instead can aim inwards. Part 3. An interesting topic that I have seen spread and disseminated throughout the media is the idea of accepting unchanging bad things as the good and positive. An interesting example of this is present in the idea of the boredom of life. Since we cannot live forever, some people resort to saying that if they did live forever it would become boring to them, and because of this they would not want to live forever. This argument is stupid for many reasons, however, the most obvious of which is simply the fact that people do not stick to this pseudo-life-denying idea. If living for an extended period is such a hassle, then why act to prolong one's life at all? For many, it is not the boredom or enjoyment of life that keeps them going but rather those who are around them. To the same point, the notion of pain being a necessary precursor for achievement holds the same merit. It is often no longer that the achievement in and of itself is good, but rather the pain that comes along with such an achievement is as much a necessary striving point. Such a point reminds me of a bullied child, coping with his pain by saying that such bullying builds character, or a slave, merry in his workload, as without such a load he knows not what to do with his time. This thinking is the ultimate form of defeat, because not only are you defeated physically but mentally also. It is not so much that the loss has been inflicted, but that now the loss itself is seen as a positive. The point itself is oftentimes true, however instead there should be a striving for the product without the necessity of the progenitor, yet when such actions are undertaken, there is scoff and scorn from those who endured the wrath of the progenitor. Think of someone who has undergone liposuction in order to reduce their body fat. There is a lowering of the brow and a smirk on the face from many. Often being said that they took the easy way out, or that they cheated. Truly all they are doing is saying the quiet part out loud. Suffer, suffer as I suffer. Such words scream out from them as righteous indignation and envy. Now, to the point of cheating, how is it that one can cheat in such an unfair game, as the one of life? End of Chapter 1. Chapter 2, Life as Conflict. Part 1. When it comes to ideas, and one's thoughts on the world and how it should function on a macro scale, there are various different pathways in which one could go down, with each one having some advantages over the other. However, when we think of ideas of socialism, communism, conservatives, or libertarianism, the main distinguishing factors here aren't logistical questions of efficacy, but rather questions of microscale personal preference. Even if each one of these systems, communism, libertarianism, etc., was to work, would it be that everyone would like to live in these systems? There seems to be an idea espoused in all walks of the political aisle, that their ideal system, beyond the ones that are even feasible, would manifest the most amount of joy for the most amount of people, that even those who initially disagreed with their ideas would come around after seeing the success of their idealized nation. Unfortunately, this idea does not take into account just how different people are at a base level. Many of these ideas of political systems are higher-order ideas or the product of base personality traits. Examples of such would be the Big Five: openness, conscientiousness, extroversion, agreeableness, neuroticism, etc. Studies have found that the presence of parasites or famine in an area is a positive predictor of people in that area starting to support the creation of an authoritarian system of government. People with scores high in conscientiousness tend to strive for more order, a tendency that is associated with conservative values. Conversely, people who score high in creativity and openness to experience tend to be more liberal. I could go on to speak about these traits, but you can often see them for yourself. One's temperament and political leaning, for the vast amount of cases, are two sides of the same coin. From this, it could be said that political stances and overarching political systems are not attempts at top-down transition, but rather a bottom-up reformation of nigh-on immutable characteristics. When one says they want this or that political system, what is being stated implicitly is a normative claim, that all ought to be as I am, a prescription destined for failure. Part 2. Be always aware that wherever there is light there is also darkness. As long as there is the concept of winners there must so too be the concept of losers. It is cause and effect and one cannot be separated from the other. Do not forget in the unfairness of the world, that there are those who benefit from said unfairness. Winners themselves love nothing more than losers, as the losers are that which necessitates their victory. The more losers in their wake, the sweeter said victory becomes. This is an action of give and take, where the loss is great, and the victory can soon spoil. After a great victory, a summit to a previously unforeseeable peak, there is, at a moment, an air of euphoria, yet, after such an event, what is replaced by this euphoria? Mere joy? Excitement? Self-exaltation? None of these are what follows is apathy and emptiness. This phenomenon is known as the arrival fallacy, where the brain effectively acclimatizes to this success, whilst also desiring to strive towards the next, like a petulant child, in a continuous search for the myth of the perfect toy. How is it that such a sweet dessert could leave such a bitter aftertaste? Hunger begets hunger, and is it not that the sin of such gluttony is deadly? Achievement begets achievement. No, it is more than that. It is as if an insatiable beast, feeding on those who are less than itself. Is any event more exemplary of Schopenhauer's claim that the pleasure in this world, it has been said, outweighs the pain, or, at any rate, there is an even balance between the two? If the reader wishes to see shortly whether this statement is true, let him compare the respective feelings of two animals, one of which is engaged in eating the other. Here it is not that the victor is the beast devouring the other, one is ravaged yet the other is starving, in both sorrow abounds. Such can only be the work of a philosopher's stone, an odium fati alchemist, for much has been given, and even more, taken. End of Chapter 2. Chapter 3, Life as an Immoral Act. It's often thought nowadays that in some respect we should act against the laws which once governed us as a species, making us the true rulers of ourselves and our own destinies. Although some may believe that this is not the right way to go, and will even go to extremes to display to others that this is indeed the wrong direction, that does not stop our march forward. Yet it is important to remember our very first strides, The leaps that were made where all odds were against us, and the very few that were able to pull through against such odds. However, moving on from this point is where the problem begins. The vast majority of human life is punctuated by war and conflict. The earlier you go, the more that conflict's victor can be assumed to simply be the most powerful out of the two. Nonetheless, these actions were seen as being immoral by any standard that we would put on them nowadays. We could make the point that this was a different time and there was nothing that we could do in order to fix these issues. This is often the point that is brought up when we think about topics such as slavery. The point is that slavery happened, and was obviously a bad thing. However, now we live in a civilization where people are treated equally, therefore there would be no need for any sort of reparations, or activity like that. Say whatever you will about the topic of racism, or reparations, but it would simply be incorrect to assume that the actions of our ancestors, or rather the actions that were forced upon them, have no consequence on us now. It is best here not to think about any isolated event of one tribe or group dominating another. Rather, it would be best to think of all of human life as one in the domination of another. This is not the only way to characterize human life, obviously, but for the purposes of this discussion it is the most relevant. This doesn't mean one large group dominating another one, or one country taking another prisoner. Here I am talking about the very bare bones of the actions. A precursor for your existence is that your ancestors were the victors in one way or another, leaving behind countless victims in their wake. It would be true to say that we all sit upon a throne of a million corpses, rarely veering down to look at where we sit, yet we sit, nonetheless, unfazed. This, however, is not the biggest problem with this societal shift from overt to somewhat covert domination. Rather, the problem is the new age rules deny ascension through violence. You obviously now cannot go up to someone, kill them, and take all of their land for your own. It is no longer a survival of the fittest, or rather maybe it never was. Was it not a battle of those who could best climb the hierarchy? Yet now the hierarchy has changed, but the winners are still the same. The winners of the hierarchy shift often keep their position as winners simply because they are so far ahead of others that the shifts did not affect their standings. However, let it not be forgotten the reason why they are now on top is for a reason which in this new shift is seen as immoral and no longer permissible. If you were to ascend the same way, you would be branded as an immoral cretin. Yet those who have power would simply be said to be playing out the shift of their era well. This retroactive moral permissibility does not sit right with me, especially when the benefactors of such temporally immoral acts are sitting like fat cats upon the well-perfumed corpses of the masses. Yet, is it not true that we are all such benefactors? We do not think to ourselves of the actions of our predecessors, those who carved flesh so that we may live. Such an idea is still incompatible with many people. Think of two examples. The first being someone who has a father that committed multiple homicides, and has a 150-year sentence. He dies 80 years into that sentence and you, being his son, have to serve the remaining 70 years. Most, when faced with this problem, may wax poetic about the injustice of such a system that penalizes a man for the mere act of choosing the wrong parents, yet when one is the beneficiary of great wealth that they accrued from the simple act of being born into a prosperous family, they lament about the painstaking toil those before themselves went through, and that it would only be right for them to now reap that which they have not sown. A more practical example of such an event would be when it was put forward in the United States that inheritance should be taxed to a higher degree. You see here, my friends, the differentiating factor here is not whether or not the actions of one's ancestors were moral or immoral, but rather how much said actions benefit them. From these prior accusations and the fact that such accusations pertain to all living mankind, the most reasonable conclusion to make in light of such a revelation would be to say that current existence in this world is an inherently immoral act, going by any life-affirming moralistic system. There are, I am sure, a litany of responses to my claim. For example, the fact that if one immoral act pertains to all, an original sin of sorts, does that not inherently make such an action immoral? Or at least diminish its quantitative immorality? Without pre-reading the rest of this book, I would in fact say that this is really in essence the only logical response to my premise, to simply dismiss it, similar to how one would dismiss natural disasters on the other side of the world. It is not that the event which is happening is not dire, but rather that we are not in a position to care about such a situation, we cannot donate our money to all the causes, in the same way that we cannot solve this moralistic problem. However, what if we could? End of Chapter 3. Chapter 4, Life as a Stepping Stone. Part 1. It is interesting, the idea of escapism. We have in effect made worlds that are more preferable, or suited to each individual, so much so that many quite literally make these aspects their new lives, yet, whenever such an event is brought up it is referred to as a bad thing, that one should go out into the real world. However, just because something is real, that does not make it ontologically good. One's desire for reality seems to be a maladaptive conflation of sentimentality with morality. One's preference for that which is real can be seen similarly to one's preference for a car that is old and run down, that they have had for so long, and had many memorable experiences in, over a newer car that is better in almost every way. Think now to points that negate escapism. Listen to the language that is used, this almost ethereal language about reality, that it is nigh on sublime, yet the escapist sits in front of a world that he has deemed in every way to be preferable. Here it can be said, a definite assertion, that reality in and of itself is not good. To go even further than this, how can you be so sure that reality is even real? There is a philosophical conundrum known as the brain in the vat problem. It posits that since all qualia are only relevant within interpretations present in our minds, then how is it not possible that we are not simply brains floating in a vat, being stimulated to feel the experiences that we are experiencing right now? Normally, at least to me, this seems like somewhat of an asinine question, always leaving me questioning, okay, now what, after it has been stated? It is a descriptive claim with no possible prescriptions. However, if one was to make a hierarchical claim about the realness of reality, the existence of the brain in a vat question completely dismantles any such hierarchy, because we cannot even say, now, for certain that reality is truly real, and therefore reality has no precedent over escapism. Part 2. We are now breaking even more the barrier between fiction and reality. Looking at video games, it has gotten to the point where some games have become indistinguishable from real life, allowing us to become fully immersed in this new environment, that, at times, these games are perceived as being as real as reality itself, or even at times, even more real. When involved in video games there is a guaranteed possibility of achievement. If you are able to do XYZ, then you are able to achieve XYZ every time. There are no coin flips, or dice rolls, unless you want there to be. Here I am talking about achievement mainly in single-player non-leaderboard-based games. Such certainty does not, however, exist in the real world. Someone could work as hard as they possibly could, and do all that could possibly be done, but still not achieve what they put in. This is more commonly known as failure to launch, and it is a prevalent problem among young people, as is, in part, the reason why they are resorting to escapism. Part 3. There is a common idea in both Eastern and Western cultures of living the dream. This idea often entails someone who is living out the life that they envision for themselves, or a general societal ideal of what a good life is. The idea of a dream has always had positive connotations. From telling someone to have sweet dreams when they go to bed, to the idea of someone following their dreams when it comes to them fulfilling some kind of goal that they have set out for themselves, in each of these cases it seems to be universal, that the idea of a dream is good and preferable to a non-dream-like state. This is going to be a new concept to most of you, however, I will make my point as clear as I can. In theory, it is quite simple, but practically it will be the most daunting task man has ever undertaken. First, let us think of dreams. Dreams are, in my opinion, the most fascinating part about the human body. We are able to create an entire world, which at the time when we are dreaming seems completely logically coherent to ourselves, and from that world, we are able to go on adventures, and explore that which we would never be able to explore in the real world. Oftentimes these dreams act to tell us something, either something that we might be neglecting, as can be seen in recurring dreams, or that which we fear, as can be seen in nightmares. Yet the most amazing part about dreaming, excluding lucid dreamers, is that we are not able to tell that we are in a dream. We experience this world, completely devoid of our previous understanding and knowledge of our lives and experiences, and somehow our brain is able to convince us that this is really, genuinely, our lives. Even sometimes having false memories, often played out in the dream, that we can extrapolate in order to add validity to this dream state. There is one more interesting quirk about dreams. When we dream, that which we create in our dreams are made out of the building blocks of our reality. It is rare for you to see someone in your dreams that you do not personally know the face of. It might be that all the people in your dreams are either of the categories I just mentioned or some sort of amalgamation of facial features of people that you know. Either way, this amazingly creative event is played out entirely by our own brain's subconscious, almost as a jab at reality, saying snarkily to itself, that anything you can do I can do better, and truly it is not wrong. At times it almost seems as if reality is the dream, the way it often lacks vibrancy and awe. When compared to dreams, there is something about reality that seems somewhat too real, it is too logical, it makes too much sense. That is reality's shortcoming and why it is superseded by dreams. It does not know how to have fun. The final point I will make about the amazing existence of dreams is that it seems that we often do not remember them when we awake from our sleep. It is as if the dream world itself is not compatible with the mechanics of the real world, and if both were to exist in one's mind at the same time it might just be too much to handle. Either way, the temporal and ethereal nature of dreams is what makes them so special. Their commonality, cloaked in a veil of rarity, as with Cinderella, pre-midnight, a beautiful dream, yet when the clock rings 12, all that is left to show of the tale is a glass slipper. Where, oh where have my dreams gone, and when again will they return to me? End of Chapter 4. Chapter 5, Life as a Puppeteer. It is often thought, either implicitly or explicitly, that one is in control of one's actions. It feels that way at least. As I move my arm up, so too does my arm move. But think beyond this level. Why do you desire to move your arm? Why do I desire to write it? Why do I desire to write this book? Such is the infinite regression, or rather the regression that on its face seems infinite, but ends with the statement because you were told to do so. Freedom is both non-existent and fallacious in its perceived existence. As all animals do, we do what we are told. When we follow completely the path of the infinite, why the end reasoning is ultimately because I was told to do so. It is thought often that the terminus is rather because I wanted to do so. However, this is a misunderstanding of the pronoun. For you to do something, it is first necessary for the reasoning behind said action to come about. Whether that reasoning is done consciously or subconsciously, such actions can never be the terminus of the infinite why, as they in themselves require further decomposition. A micro-adjustment of the hand, relating to the subconscious, supposes discomfort to be undesirable. Why is such a state undesirable? It would be tedious to go into the science, as the answer is now as it would be post-analysis, that being, because I was told so. There are two levels of freedom, yet each is mere smoke and mirrors, a phantom, like a sweet dream. It seems so real, so bliss, till the slits in our faces once more kiss the air, and the phantom fades to come back once again when our body's movement is ceasing, and our mind lies open and vacuous. There does the phantom make its resting place. Who else could fill such a void, better than nothing? At the first level, that which has the least freedom is the direct action, doing something because you were told explicitly to do so. The example of a child cleaning comes to mind. This is a desirable state, or at least preferable to the state of the wrath of the parent, a calculation made in the mind of the child that stays with him often till death. The second level would be that of explicit freedom, however implicit dogma. This is the nature of the West currently. You are not told what job to work, what clothes to wear, what car to drive, or whether to drive at all. You truly can do what you want, within reason of course. Such a perception of the world is asinine. All that is within our means can be done, and all that can be done has a price, whether that is social ridicule, discomfort, or a mere guilty conscience. No will is free, there is always a price attached. Your ability to do said cost analysis, so too is brought about by the combination of nurture and nature. As Pavlov's dog's mouth waters when the bell is rung, so to do your eyes widen when one which you admire displays something within your means. Such is the perlocution of the act of admiration, as such is the final level of freedom. A phantom still it remains. We are bound by strings so fine that they cannot even be seen, so soft they cannot even be felt, so thin that their movement cuts through the air and cannot be held, so too are the strings tasteless and odorless. I am a marionette. All the movements I think are endemic to my own volition are struts and sways made by the puppet master. We are all the controlled, and in that way, we are that which controls us, the manifestation of the will itself. End of Chapter 5. Chapter 6, Life as Vanya. Where there is light there is also darkness. As long as there are winners there will also be losers as well. It is cause and effect and one cannot be separated from the other. But imagine a world that knows only winners, a world that knows only peace, a world that knows only love. Worlds like these can be created, yet they require an exchange, a high price one might say, exchanging this reality for a new one. The end idea of Vanya is a state in which one is completely immersed in a new reality. This reality would be seen as being hyperreal, meaning not only would it feel real, but it would also allow for one to not be held down by constraints that they would not want to be held down by. Think of this being the equivalent to a prosthetic for the phantom limb of the mind. This immersion would be done through the use of technology, to live another life, one without all of the misfortunes that I have mentioned prior. There is a fear of utopia for most people, with utopia often being seen as a predicate for dystopia. However, this is mainly because of the problem of unearned success. Imagine a game in which you booted it up and you had everything, and your character was maxed out. Would you continue to play this game? It might be fun for a little bit, but the novelty of such a game wears thin fairly quickly. However, this isn't how any game is designed. Game designers know that the struggle, and the grind, are what gives satisfaction. Such is why the completion of Dark Souls, or speed running, or pacifist runs, carry with them such merit because they are hard to achieve. Vanya will be the same. Vanya will work on a simple predicate: the hotter the battle the sweeter the victory, with the heat and the pain being adjusted for each person so that the perception is identical, even if the Fahrenheit might be different. To use a somewhat questionable coinage, to each according to his ability, to each according to his will. Now let me go to explain how each problem of existence as it currently stands can be fixed by Vanya. Part 1, Life as Heaven. Vanya, in and of itself, will be one of the most difficult undertakings humanity has ever achieved. However, so too will it bring us the greatest reward. It will be the terminus reality so desperately needs. The end that needs to be strived towards. Now it can be said for the first time, as we sit as conscious beings, that we are moving forward, that we are advancing, that we are moving towards. No longer do we spin in place, now we march onwards. Part 2, Life as Peace. Now, in each individual's Vanya, one, if they so desire, can have both bottom-up and top-down desires for a world to be one and the same. There can be an objective good, an objective evil, and a universal preference for one over the other. No more do we have to abide by the rules of logic or reality. There can be light, without dark, and there can be winners, without losers. Let all be fair, and let all be just, where no animal has the appetite for another. Part 3, Life as a Moral Act. No more is the consequence of one's life dependent on the actions of their predecessors, and no longer do they need to be bound by this thread of immoralism. The past as it is now is the progenitor of the future, yet Vanya has no progenitor, it stands alone and immaculate. Let this chair of corpses return to the ground from where it once drew breath, and let it do so again, as another. Part 4, Life as a Becoming. We can now dispense fully with the idea of the realism hierarchy. There is no definite, that which is real, and here is the ultimate escape, or rather emancipation, a world truly made in one's image, where truly anything can be achieved, and more importantly, one has the ability to strive. Part 5, Life as an Observer. In a way this is the true acceptance of the will, the true amor fati. Now we are able to express our will to its fullest extent, to bathe and soak in our own desires, to dance in the most beautiful play the puppeteer could ever arrange, and so too to dance beautifully. Conclusion. To end off, let me make a point about that which is external to Vanya. If one does not want to join or enter Vanya, that can be seen as an immoral action, due to the points made in Chapter 3, however, even so, they should not be forced to enter. As I said previously, the preference for this reality over one that which is better, is similar to the preference over a car. Though it is objectively incorrect, this does not make the choice itself invalid. To the point about the outside environment, judging by the brain in the vat logic, it cannot be said that this world and environment are any more or less real than Vanya. However, one's emotions are. If one wishes to tend to the fields, or simply to bask in nature, they should not be stopped from doing so. the heavens were made to be glanced upon, so glance, but just know there is a more beautiful sky out there. The paths of Vanya. Below are the stages in which Vanya will be achieved. Since we cannot instantly achieve our end, it is paramount that steps are laid out in order to achieve the end of true Vanya. The first path. Acceptance of nation's inability to create an objective path forward, outside of Vanya, and an extreme focus on the current individual rather than the sheer perpetuation of society. 1. Jobs for the person rather than jobs for society, supplied by a state body. However, it must be ensured that said person is engaged in some activity. However, the benefit of said activity to society is irrelevant. 2. Ability and availability to change long-run mental state with such products as nootropics and psychedelics. 3. A general acceptance of the principles of the Prater path, e.g. the understanding of the large role genetics and nurture play in one's upbringing, and the understanding of the idea that free will doesn't exist to any great degree, especially not a great enough degree as to lambaste others for said failing in life, as if you were them, you would do the same. The second path. Acceptance and understanding of escapism and the reason why people are deciding to escape from reality, through forms of reality that are seen as being preferable but not real, e.g. video games, dating sims, etc. 1. At this point people will live out large amounts of their lives in virtual reality and will realize that such truth is preferable to what is real. 2. Because of this it is likely that there are virtual reality jobs that people can do, which they can get paid for, as these jobs will help the attainment of the third path of Vanya. The third path. Almost all people will have their own specialized reality where they are able to achieve whatever goal or aim they have. There is no within reason or caveat. All will be able to achieve what they aim to achieve, and there will be true hope. A world of only winners, a world of only peace, a world of only love. Vanya is such a world. End of Chapter 6. Chapter 7, Prater. The achievement of Vanya will be the natural progression of the world, the logical conclusion of reality. All that needs to be done is to make the pain which is felt in the coming years known. Such pain will come naturally, and it is necessary for said pain to be known. In the same way, the pain of climbing a mountain is necessary in order to reach its summit. Through Prater, Vanya shall be known. For our ambition.